So let me welcome our first speaker, Andrew Hoover, a research assistant in the Social Environment and Health program at the University of Michigan Institute for Social Research. Andrew, I will turn it over to you.
This one? Oh, okay, perfect. Yep. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Andrew Hoover, and I'm a recent graduate from the U of M School of Public Health. And then I'm also a accelerated master's student in their environmental health science department. And I'm going to be talking today about my project, the associations between high-risk business types for respiratory pathogen transmission and COVID cases in Wisconsin neighborhoods. And just to start off, I want to really talk about the COVID Neighborhood Project, which has given me a lot of inspiration for the work I'm going to be talking about today. And this work aims to build a nationwide COVID-19 database at the census tract and zip code level. And for this project, I contacted every health department every state health department in the US and collected spatially referenced case data from 21 states. And then this project, the hallmark of it is linking it with the National Neighborhood Data Archive, NANDA, which many of you are familiar with, particularly the disadvantage, affluence, and population density measures. Now I wanted to present some of the published findings for this project. And I was trying to see if everyone could see it, but it looks like you all can, great. So on this screen, in this map, there's the yellow, which indicates low cases, and this is representing the COVID cases per 10,000 cumulative from 2020 to 2022. And the red case, or the red shading, indicates higher cases. And so what you can see is some states have a ton of red, indicating very high cases across all of the state's neighborhoods, and others have a lot of yellow, indicating lower across all their neighborhoods. And then some states have really a mix of all and in between. So what I really want you to see from that is that COVID burden varies across US neighborhoods, and this project is really aimed at understanding why. So is it the susceptibility of the residents in those neighborhoods? Is it the built environment of those neighborhoods? What factors are causing these differences in COVID burden? And that leads me to the aims of this project, which are to characterize the business types in Wisconsin according to their hypothesized risk for respiratory pathogen transmission, and then to examine the association between neighborhood level average transmission risk based on these business types and then COVID cases. And then the last is to see how these associations shift when incorporating neighborhood level social factors, including disadvantage and affluence. And now many of you are probably wondering why Wisconsin? Essentially, it's the most complete COVID case count data that we have for the COVID Neighborhood Project. It has daily census tract level case counts, and it includes confirmed and probable cases, and then it also provides a wide variety of testing information. And the state from the map that I'd showed previously had a wide variety of variation among neighborhood case counts, so it wasn't all homogeneous in terms of the COVID burden. And then also this project, in the previous published work, we found that Wisconsin didn't have a robust relationship between SES and COVID cases, so this project is really aiming at, does the business distribution provide any sort of insight into this relationship? And that leads me to the business categorization. So we created a score to identify high-risk businesses for respiratory pathogens. And the two factors we used for that were congregation, which reflects the number of people in the business type, and then contact, which is the types of interaction occurring predominantly in that business type. And we categorized 67 business types, and those were the types that NANDA has count data for from 2017 from the National Establishment Time Series Database NETS. For these specific scores, so congregation we found and derived by calculating the average number of visits in a given business type, and we used Advent Research mobile phone data to calculate this, where we could get pinpoint of location of travel for individuals. And then we created quartiles for the average number of visits across all the business types in Wisconsin, where 1 indicates the lowest quartile, so these were the business types that had the lowest average number of visits, and 4 was the highest quartile. For contact, we conceptualized the most prevalent interaction occurring in a given business type using the CDC COVID guidelines. We used 1 to reflect that there was no contact occurring in a given business type, so you are never within 6 feet of someone. 2 is the non-conversational contact, so you're within 6 feet of someone but didn't talk. 3 is conversational, where you did talk and were within 6 feet of someone, and then physical contact for 4. And this was based on a characterization that involved a lot of inter-rater reliability across myself, my colleagues, and my lab group. And then from this, we essentially summed these 2 scores to get an overall transmission risk for a given business type. So now I just want to say how we got from those business types to the actual neighborhood average transmission risk. So we mapped the scores for these types to their corresponding counts in Wisconsin census tracts, and then from that, we could take an average to get the average transmission risk for a census tract based on the businesses within it. So just to provide an example, if there are 4 businesses in a tract, so 2 of business A, 1 for B, and 1 for C, and then the transmission scores for those businesses based on the congregation and contact for A were 7, B 3, and C 5. The mapped values, which we essentially multiplied the count by the score, so business A would be 2 times 7 for 14, and then B would be 3, C would be 5. And then from this, we could create the average by adding these together and dividing that by the number of businesses in the tract, which was 4, which would give an average for this tract of 5.5. So now just to provide some characteristics of this measure. So again, the business type score, the combination of congregation and contact ranged from 2 to 8. The average score for a whole neighborhood ranged from 4.2 to 6.7, with a median both around 5.1 and a standard deviation of 0.2. Getting into the statistical analyses, we ran negative binomial models to assess the association between neighborhood level COVID cases and then the average transmission risk based on the businesses in that neighborhood. And then we also included neighborhood social factors from NANDA. We adjusted for population density in Model 1. In Model 2, we adjusted for both population density and then disadvantage. And then in Model 3, we adjusted for population density and then affluence. All right, getting into the results, it's 1 slide and there's a lot on it, so I'm gonna walk through all the different parts of it. So this graph depicts incident rate ratios for the neighborhood average transmission risk and COVID cases, where the bottom, the x-axis, is the incident rate ratio. And then on the left-hand side, you can see the models, which correspond to the numbers down below, where Model 1, reflected in the blue, is cases, and then against average transmission risk and population density. The green Model 2 is the one that includes disadvantage, and then Model 3 is the one that includes affluence instead of disadvantage. And what you can see from this is that in Wisconsin census tracts, 1 point increase in average transmission risk is associated with a 4.7% increase in COVID cases, adjusting for population density. So that's based on the blue line. And then for the green, you see the exact same thing, a 4.7% increase in COVID cases, and that's also adjusting for disadvantage. And then for affluence, you see a 4.9% increase for a 1 point increase in the average transmission score, and that's adjusting for both population density and affluence. So overall, what you can see from this is that there is evidence that the distribution of businesses across Wisconsin neighborhoods is associated with COVID cases, and that this relationship was not attenuated by neighborhood affluence or disadvantage. And then so future directions from this work, I hope to improve the categorizations of our businesses. So the Advan data also provides information on the time spent in a business, so I hope to include that. And then I also hope to analyze the other 20 states that had a COVID data through the COVID Neighborhood Project. And then from this, the ultimate goal is really to identify high-risk businesses in those neighborhoods, and then conduct really more zoomed in approaches to see what specific things about the businesses in those neighborhoods are causing them, the residents in that neighborhood, to have increased COVID burden. And then I hope to disseminate this information to health departments so that they can understand if their neighborhood is at particularly high risk for infectious disease pathogen burden based on the businesses within it. My take-home message, if it's the one thing you take away from this, we must explore the mechanisms by which neighborhoods may face increased respiratory pathogen burden, like the business distributions within them, to truly understand how to mitigate infectious disease disparities. And now I just want to thank my co-authors, mentors, and lab members for their contributions on this work, and then the funding that made it all possible. Thank you.